All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Griffin. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. And tonight we are pleased to be partnering with Dakota News Now, the Argus Leader, and AARP to bring you the City of Sioux Falls mayoral candidate debate featuring our three candidates, Paul Tenhaken, Tanisa Islam, and David Zakaitis. Our three candidates will join us on stage shortly, but first, I'd like to introduce our moderators for tonight's debate. Representing Dakota News Now, we have Brian Allen, who is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and weeknight news anchor. During his nearly 20 years of journalism experience, Brian has interviewed the likes of President George W. Bush and President Bill Clinton. Joining Brian and representing the Argus Leader is Trevor Mitchell. Trevor serves as the local government watchdog and politics reporter for the Argus Leader Media. We're thrilled to have Brian and Trevor moderating tonight's event. Now, I'd like to invite our three mayoral candidates to the stage. Please help me in welcoming Paul Tenhaken, Tanisa Islam, and David Zakaitis to the stage. Thank you again to our candidates for joining us tonight, and to all of you in our live audience. Appreciate you all being here. No matter what your positions tonight, I think it's always a good time to remember we live under the blanket of freedom here in this country. We can assemble peacefully, and we admire these folks for putting their name on the ballot and choosing to be leaders in our community. So with that, gentlemen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Sioux Falls mayoral debate here at the Washington Pavilion. My name is Brian Allen. I am with Dakota News Now.
I'm Trevor Mitchell from the Argus Leader. Tonight's debate is brought to you by the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce, AARP South Dakota, the Argus Leader, and Dakota News Now.
We have gone over the debate rules with the candidates and the audience. We also drew for the order of candidates backstage just moments ago. We will begin tonight's debate with Tanisa Islam.
Ms. Islam, you've said a focus of your administration would be revitalizing the city's core neighborhoods. What specific actions need to be taken to accomplish that goal?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we are standing on the ancestral lands of the Ocheti Sakowin. Our downtown is the gem of our city. Revitalizing our core neighborhoods makes sense. That means investing in revitalization programs so that homes can be brought up to code and their facade can be brought up to an aesthetic that meets our downtown. To do this, we need to invest in these core neighborhoods by revitalization funds that come from grants, from other programs, and also from investment of the city. Because of our public transportation limitations, it also makes sense to invest in our core neighborhoods so that people living in those neighborhoods where our public transportation is right now can easily move around the city in a way they are not able to at this time.
Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on the topic.
Yeah, core revitalization. First off, nice tie, Trevor Mitchell. First time I've seen him in a tie. Core revitalization has been, a big focus of our administration for the last 4 years. One of the challenges we have right now, obviously, is the affordability around housing and around labor and materials to do revitalization initiatives. So when we talk about moving homes or we talk about revitalizing the core, one of the things that we have to look at is what are we doing with homes that exist there in terms of can we move them to other places? Can we buy land in other parts of the city to move those houses to in case...
Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the topic.
All right. I think the other two candidates have spoken well about the need to revitalize our core, but we might be able to use some of the funds currently allocated from TIFs and use that instead for home ownership. TIFs subsidize big development projects, but if we use those funds instead to revitalize our core neighborhoods, then we could do really well and help them all just do better.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, your administration recently released a draft of a sustainability plan that was quickly put on hold following some negative feedback, including from several city councilors, citing concerns including whether construction and automotive industries had been given enough input. How much input should industries have that could face challenges from sustainability efforts?
Well, first off, I wouldn't say it was put on hold. It was a draft plan that was released for an open comment period, and we're extending that comment period through the end of the year. Essentially, we were overwhelmed with the amount of feedback we got on climate and resiliency initiatives in the community, not just from the industry, not just from developers, but from the entire community. So our administration leads with an effort that always tries to bring people to the table. That's why we say one Sioux Falls a lot. Well, all the people that had very strong opinions on both sides on this topic really came out of the woodwork, to be quite honest, after we released that plan. So the fair and smart and prudent thing to do was to extend the open comment period through the end of the year so we could hear from the development industry, the home building industry, the energy industry, and as well as a lot of residents who also wanted to see us go further in some ways, and also residents who felt went too far. And so I think that's the sign of good policy when there's that healthy tension.
Mayor Tenhagen, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the topic of sustainability.
Sustainability is critical to the long-term survival of our people and our planet. If we're not good to the earth, if we don't reduce carbon emissions, if we don't reverse global warming, we're just not going to do very well. The Great Plains are going to turn into a dust bowl if we're not careful. I think Mayor Tenhagen's off to a good start with some of his stability initiatives, but I'm kind of leery about them being released so close to the election. I think if we were more sincere in our efforts as a city government.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on sustainability.
It's critical to understand that Sioux Falls is behind in any type of plan or planning when it comes to sustainability measures. I understand that the stakeholders who were part of developing that plan over the last year and a half are completely frustrated by the lack of continuity and support for the plan they have put together, and is being halted for continuous input from stakeholders who are already part of the group in developing that plan.
Ms. Islam, thank you.
Mr. Zakaitis, you've regularly called the transparency and the ethics of the Sioux Falls government into question. How would your administration be more transparent?
In terms of ethics, there's a problem with bribery in Sioux Falls. You go to www.davidzformayor.org/bribery, and you can read about that. What my administration would have done is investigate and disclose. If there's a suspected bribery, the thing to do is you check into it and figure out what the heck is going on. And in terms of transparency, if anybody wants to know anything that we can legally give to them, that's what we'll do. I can't make a broader, more blanket statement than that. Transparency is important, so is integrity, and anything anybody wants to know, we'll try to give it to them. Right, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaitis. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on transparency.
Transparency is a really large issue. There are small measures that this administration has taken to make it more difficult for everyday people like you and me to give comment and public comment at City Council as they've pushed back that period. For working mothers and working fathers, children who need to go to bed early, that becomes really difficult. In addition, we need to get away from negotiated land sales, and any sale of land needs to be done through an RFP process.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhagen, 30 seconds on your administration's transparency.
Yeah, RFP process has led to the ramp situation that we've been dealing with the last 4 years. As far as transparency, this mayor has open office hours in his meeting. We added public input to the first and second readings of every single city council item. We've actually extended the amount of public input offered to city government during my administration. So I've probably been one of the most accessible mayors that we've ever had. You can hit me up on DM, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, email, Facebook. You can find me a lot of places.
Mayor Tenhagen, thank you. Ms. Islam, you have said one of your top issues in this campaign is affordable housing. What specifically can the city realistically do to solve this problem on a scale that would have a true impact?
Just to respond to Paul's comment about being the most accessible mayor, when he first took office, I reached out to his office a couple times and was actually denied the process of signing up for a 30-minute slot because I was told that as a stakeholder, I could not sign up. So I wanted to share that with the public. When it comes to affordable housing, The bottom line is we need an infusion of money into our system to incentivize developers to build affordable housing because they cannot make a profit out of it. So how do we do that? We need to ask our big businesses who are lucky enough to be building in Sioux Falls right now to provide money for basic infrastructure like affordable housing. Because I've been asking if when we enticed Amazon to come to Sioux Falls, did we ask them to invest billions of dollars like they're doing in other cities here in Sioux Falls? And the answer has been no, because we didn't even make the ask.
Ms. Islam, that's time. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on affordable housing.
We did ask Amazon. We're not on their radar in terms of market size for those sorts of investments. You know, affordable housing is a very challenging topic because it's market-driven. And what's happening in the market right now is record inflation, record supply chain disruption, record land costs, increasing interest rates, and a variety of issues that, quite honestly, are not under the control of a local government. So we'll continue to do things like purchasing land for home moves and providing other incentives, but the market is the market, and the market's a challenge.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on affordable housing.
We have a lack of affordable housing because that's what's profitable. The lack is profitable. If a developer can make a whole bunch of big, expensive houses and sell all of them, they don't need to worry about cheap little houses for poor people. So I think the thing to do is to set up a quota system that says, for so many giant big houses, you have to build so many little houses. And hopefully I'll be able to get input from city council and developers to flesh out the details of such a plan.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you.
Mayor Tenhaken, diversity has become a true issue during the last 4 years of your term, both nationally and here at home. Could you describe for me the relationship you have with Sioux Falls' LGBTQ community?
Well, one of the core roles of a mayor is to create a community that's accessible and welcoming to all our residents. In fact, Friday, I'll be on the stage at the Great Hall here, welcoming probably about 200 of our newest residents for a naturalization ceremony. So the LGBTQ community wants the same thing that we all want: good roads, good infrastructure, good jobs, economic development, good schools. And I've been a mayor that has created a community that's welcoming and inviting for all. And so if there's ever been an issue, a policy, an agenda item, a statement I've made that's ever made any group feel welcome, unwelcome, I should say, I'd encourage someone to point that out to me. But it hasn't existed because I'm working to build a community that's inviting, welcoming for everyone.
Mayor, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on your relationship with the LGBTQ community.
I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything. When I was out canvassing somewhere, one of the LGBT people asked me what I thought about them, and I said they're people. And that's really everything you need to say, because that's it. I mean, we're all just people trying to do the best we can. I've got good relationships with them and with other people, and I've got a nice gay flower on my van. It's been there for a couple of years after one of the last gay events. And yeah, we're all just people. Relax and have a good time.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on your relationship with the LGBTQ community.
My career in South Dakota started in lobbying against bigoted bills in Pierre. At that time, the targets were immigrants and refugees, and now it's our LGBTQ plus QIA community plus transgender youth. We walk alongside all of those communities who have to fight that bigotry because we need to have a welcome community for all. And what that means is having the courage to step up against the bullies, to make sure that our communities are seen and heard equally.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, you ran for mayor 4 years ago. You are running again this election cycle. Please explain to us the number one issue that prompted you to seek election again this year.
Well, it's not so much that I'm seeking election again, it's just that I never really stopped after the last go-around. And really, I've been looking at local government for years and analyzing problems and issues and making nice PowerPoints and presenting them. I've done that like 145 times at city council meetings. So it's not that I'm starting again, it's just that I just never really stopped. And the same issues that motivated me 4 years ago are still here today. We've got problems with income inequality and civil rights and bad government that doesn't listen to the people. And why stop if you're on a roll? So I didn't. I'm just on a roll.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds. Why are you running?
I started a nonprofit organization in 2017 named South Dakota Voices for Peace, where we lift immigrant and refugee communities and most of us who are unheard and unseen. The pandemic really exacerbated the lack of infrastructure city government has to meet the needs of multilingual communities specifically. And in exploring that avenue, I've realized that there's lack of access to information and services for many people in our community. And that's why I know with my 20 years of community experience, I'm the right candidate for what Sioux Falls needs to get into the next 30 years.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds. Why go for another round?
Well, to say it's been a fun 4 years would be probably a little bit of an exaggeration because it's been a hard 4 years. But we sit here today with 19% sales tax growth year over year, 1.8% unemployment, crime that's down on almost every category year over the year, and I just feel a duty, a responsibility to continue what we started. There's an optimism in Sioux Falls right now that I feel is very strong, and I want to continue that momentum into the next 4 years.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you.
Ms. Islam, you've said that the city needs to ensure that law enforcement officers are able to focus on public safety, citing a ride-along in which the majority of calls you said pertain to mental health. What measures would your administration take to ensure that focus?
Public safety is more than the police department. We need to meet the challenges of our community in this moment. Data shows that violent crimes are stagnant, and that's what law enforcement is equipped to handle. We are also seeing that mental health calls are really the critical public safety issue of our moment. What we need to do is help and provide more opportunities and services to law enforcement to meet the needs of mental health individuals facing mental health crises. What that looks like are teams of social workers, mental health counselors, addiction counselors, in addition to law enforcement going to calls in our community so that we can prevent volatile situations from leading to death, which will keep our community safer as a whole.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on, what your administration would focus on for public safety.
Yeah, public safety and mental health do really go hand in glove, and we've spent a lot of time in the last 3 years opening a link to address that very purpose, where we're able to treat people dealing with chronic mental health and addiction issues and link them to the right resources in the community. We also started the first community resource officer program that specializes in mental health. Her name's Officer Sarah Van Vorst. She's been a huge asset. It's also important to realize that some of our mental health calls are some of our most dangerous calls as a department too. And so our officers are trained in CRT and other things to work with that.
Thank you, Mayor Tenhaken. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on public safety and mental health.
We should divide public safety into two parts. There's safety from criminals and trauma, and then there's safety from an overbearing government. As far as from criminals and stuff, I think what we need to do is to focus far more on treatment and mental health and a lot less on incarceration, because if we do that, we would reduce crime. And then as far as overbearing government, we really need to help police and city government remember what the Constitution and civil rights are all about, because they're not good at it.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, record population growth in Sioux Falls has come with an accompanying growth of the city's homeless population. You recently said that we are no longer going to be expanding any homeless services in the corridor where they currently exist. As the need for assistance increases, where would your administration want to see these services expanded?
Well, I'm not sure where the quote's from. I've probably never been on record saying we're no longer, because we don't control that. And those are private partners. That's the Catholic Diocese that's in charge of Bishop Dudley, the UGM, which some of those folks are here tonight. We rely on them. Homelessness is not the city's issue. It's a we issue. And we rely on our law enforcement. We rely on UGM. We rely on Bishop Dudley. We rely on our church community to address this challenge. But I will say, and we've had this exact discussion with Bishop Dudley, they have rooms in the back for kids and families. And I question if kids and families, if that's the best environment for homeless families to be in. And so is there another spot in our community where we could put our homeless families, separating them from what can sometimes be a dangerous population? The challenge we have in Sioux Falls is, any place I would try to zone that right now, it would be met with a huge fight. and we have to continue to come up with solutions that the community can accept and get behind, knowing that as we grow, our homeless population will likely grow as well.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on homelessness in Sioux Falls.
When we drive around Sioux Falls and look on the street corners, there's people begging for money all the time. And whatever these people need, we're apparently not providing it to them. So what we need to do is to figure out what their emotional needs are, what their physical needs are, what their chemical needs are, and find a way to take care of them, because that's what the Bible teaches us, to practice Christian family values and care for the least among us. I'm not exactly sure what they need right now, but I sure have a big staff that will help us figure that out.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on homelessness in the city of Sioux Falls.
These issues are all interconnected. People are houseless because they don't have a home. People don't have a home right now in Sioux Falls because we don't have affordable housing. People also are houseless because they need long-term mental health services. The link is a great short-term start, but we need long-term services for our houseless community, and we need a systemic approach to what houseless people, who they are and why they are houseless, by increasing affordable housing.
Ms. Islam, thank you.
Mr. Zakaitis, as Sioux Falls continues to grow, what are some key infrastructure improvements that your administration would work toward over the next 4 years?
I'd like to see the bike trail grow. It's the loop around the city is great, but it's not enough. We need to connect the bike trail to the surrounding areas. And people don't usually think of a river as infrastructure, but it's a significant economic resource. When an area has a beautiful, clean river, it's easier to draw in young urban professionals. And the Big Sioux River is a smelly, polluted mess that we really need to take good care of. The city is working on expanding sewage capabilities, but they haven't told us what the contaminant level is going to be coming out of the new sewage treatment plant. And, it should be clean enough to swim in, because if you don't have every effluent clean enough to swim in, then the river just gets worse and worse. We have a lot of bumpy roads around town that need to be improved. And, all the utilities need to be checked. We have a planning and zoning service that takes care of some of these questions. And our bus service needs to expand to the new growth areas.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaitis. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on how your administration would improve infrastructure in the city.
I think it's really critical to understand that it's exciting to grow, but the way we're growing right now and sprawling across our borders here of Sioux Falls is that whenever we grow in pockets of Sioux Falls, we have to build more roads, more sewer lines, and that in 20 years will cost more money. What I'd like to see is actually more density in core neighborhoods, so we're growing up, because that is more cost-effective for a growing city.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on what your focus would be on for infrastructure.
Yeah, key infrastructure in any city that's grown like ours is water and wastewater. I mean, that really runs a city. Obviously, our roads are important. We've spent a higher percentage of our capital budget on roads and streets than any time in the last decade. But we have to get this big sewer plant expansion done. We finally got to yes on some numbers that will allow us to get it built in a somewhat affordable fashion, given the incredible inflationary times we're in. And then water. Lewis and Clark 2 is already being talked about. Water needs are going to be critical. Thank you, Gary Hansen, for getting us on Lewis and Clark 1, because it's led to where we are today.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Ms. Islam, if you are elected mayor, would you take action to make sure more city business is somehow conducted in other languages as a way to include more of the community?
1,000%. The pandemic really exposed how multilingual communities were left in the shadows on the current events of the pandemic. If you remember, during the pandemic, things were changing by the hour. I had actually reached out to the Argus and Kello and DNN and said, could you please translate what's going on in our community, at least one article, so our communities had access to information. When the schools shut down, they reached out to me at South Dakota Voices for Peace to help them translate how to go remote, how to pick up a laptop. They didn't go to the city because the city has absolutely no infrastructure to meet the growing needs of our multilingual population. That infrastructure is critical. The pandemic exposed that weakness in our city, and it is time that the city understands the essential services that is due to our residents, not just multilingual communities, but all of us.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on the topic of conducting city business in other languages.
Well, we spend a lot of money with different partners in this community. For instance, the economic development partner is called the Development Foundation. Our language translation partner is the Multicultural Center. And we lean on them. City government isn't always the answer for every solution. So the Multicultural Center in that case is our partner for language translation. I think it exposed quite honestly, some weaknesses we have there. And we've been working on that. There's a change in leadership that's happening right now there. And so that's important to realize is it's not only the city's business, but it's also partners in the community that help us solve those challenges. Mayor
Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on conducting city business in different languages.
I'm open to suggestion. So there's a blurb in my flyer booklet that says, if you have any ideas, let me know what they are. So what that means is I really don't have to know everything. I just have to know I don't know everything and to be open to suggestions. When I've gone around and talked to people, nobody's brought up the need for more language services on the part of the city. So as of 5 minutes ago, I was not aware of any of that particular need. But if we need to do it, well, sure, we'll address the problem.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you.
Mayor Tenhaken, if the course of the COVID-19 pandemic had been different and we were still in the dire straits we were 1 year ago, would you have still run for re-election?
Can you repeat that?
Sorry.
There's some interference there.
If the course of the COVID-19 pandemic had been different and we were still in the dire straits we were 1 year ago, would you still have run for re-election?
I would, because leadership requires leading through all kinds of circumstances, good times, hard times. COVID sucked. I mean, it's been a challenge. It's been extremely challenging. It's divided our community. It's divided people, piece of cloth over someone's face, split our community, and split churches, split our country. And I think, though, the reason we've weathered it the way we have is because I spend a lot of my day trying to break free from that partisan rhetoric, keep that out of Sioux Falls. So you don't need to be an R or a D in Sioux Falls. I'm an M. You're a mayor. And so would I still run? Yeah, I would still run because there's work left to be done. Will there always be armchair CDC directors in a city? Absolutely. There was a lot of them this past year. But that's part of signing up for the job, even when the job gets challenging.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds. Did the COVID-19 pandemic have any effect on your decision to run for mayor?
It's just one more problem to address. I don't mean to belittle it, but you get big problems and you get little problems, and COVID was a big problem. And, well, all right, big problems come up. You look at them, analyze them, try to decipher what the best solution is, and just keep on chugging. So, no, it did not really affect my decision to keep running for office and to keep researching problems.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaitis. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds. Did the pandemic affect your decision whether to run for mayor?
The pandemic did affect my decision to run for mayor. When the pandemic first hit, I doubled down as a community leader to meet the demands of our vulnerable communities. We were receiving phone calls from Smithfield workers at the outset of that outbreak. What I did was raise $1.2 million with private-public partnership for an emergency relief fund and translate materials multilingually so our communities had access to information. That led me to see how unequipped the city was to meet those needs.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, one of the challenges of a growing city can be an increasing rate of crime. What one thing would a Zakaitis administration introduce and support that could cut crime in the city of Sioux Falls?
A lot of crime in this city and in this country is driven by addiction. When I visited the penitentiary 4 years ago, they told me that most of the people there were there for alcohol and drug-related problems. So that tells me that the nation's alcohol and drug policy needs revamped. In particular, what we need to do is to stop hurting addicts by sending them to jail and start treating addiction as a substance abuse disorder and sending these people off to treatment so that they can rebuild their lives. And when you do that, you take away all the incentive for all these petty crimes, and you treat people more like people, and you reduce crime, disease, and addiction all in one fell swoop.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds. What one thing would you do as mayor that you believe could cut crime?
I would make a long-term investment into access to affordable childcare. We currently have over 4,000 school-age children who stay at home unsupervised after school because childcare is not accessible and affordable. To make long-term investments in our youth, it shows that childcare boosts graduation rates and lowers crimes in those areas. So I would invest for a long-term solution by working with the school district and nonprofits for childcare access.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds. What would you like to do should you be reelected?
Well, at the root of a majority of the crime in our community is narcotics, and that's just the reality. And so dealing with the issues surrounding substance abuse is going to continue to be important. That's why projects like the Link and programs like that are going to be important. It's also why I've been so bullish on mentoring. Quite honestly, some of the criminals in our community are youth, and those youth need role models in their lives to keep them on the right track. And so if I am honored to serve 4 more years, there's going to be a lot more mentor conversation coming from my office.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you.
Ms. Islam, you expressed several concerns about a recent proposal to give most full-time city employees a $2,000 bonus, saying it was staged to come right before this election. Labor leaders were publicly critical of your comments and countered that the plan had been arrived at through the collective bargaining process. How would your administration work through this rocky start to a relationship with your 1,300 city employees?
I did not have the information I needed to make a decision on what that process was. So I learned after the fact that, in fact, that collective bargaining process started 3 years ago. When the fire and police unions got raises, AFSCME did not. So in turn, that negotiation was stalled and restarted and has been going on for 3 years, and then was finally agreed to a month before the elections. Our city employees all deserve a livable wage that is adjusted for inflation from the onset, not retroactively. I fully support workers having workers' rights. I have a 20-year track record in working with workers on their rights. So I hope that the city employees will know that and understand that about me, and know that I will advocate for livable wages and a good benefits package for them for their service.
Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on this plan.
Well, the collective bargaining process and working with unions is not something that you can do in a knee-jerk way and have knee-jerk policies or comments that are made. So the collective bargaining process for us is something that we take a lot of pride in, and we hold it very sacred. And my 4 years of working with city employees has earned me their endorsement. The Fraternal Order of Police has endorsed my reelection. The AFSCME employees have endorsed my reelection because they know what sort of leader I am, that I'm for them, for the collective bargaining process, and making sure they're compensated fairly.
Thank you, Mayor Tenhaken. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on this plan.
There were 2 proposals by the administration shortly before the election that looked like they were trying to buy votes. That might not have been the actual motivation, but that's what it looked like based upon the information I had at the time. So there was a retention bonus and an increase in vacation time that both came out shortly before the election. And if there was some other motivation, well, I sure didn't hear about it at the 2 city council meetings I attended on the topic. And it just looked really bad if you try to give people a whole lot of money right before an election.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, about a year ago, you spoke of historic housing challenges as a pork processor announced plans to build a facility in Sioux Falls, saying that under normal circumstances, the addition of 1,000 more jobs would be an enormous win for the city of Sioux Falls, yet these are not normal circumstances. What would your administration's plan be to ensure less conflict and more balance between housing and workforce development?
Well, one of the things we're doing with a couple large economic development opportunities right now is encouraging that business or that employer to be part of the solution. And too often they want the economic benefit of this great climate that we've built, this great tax climate and this great community. But we also need them to help with the challenges and the problems that come with that. And one of those is housing. Employers also fill a lane in housing and childcare. years and years ago, decades ago, employers realized that healthcare was an issue. And they said, we're going to start covering some of our employees' healthcare costs. Or we're getting to a point where employers may have to see if childcare is keeping my employees out of the workforce, or if housing costs are keeping them out of the workforce. Maybe there's a role that we play as an employer in that. So I think that's the one thing that we're doing a lot of right now when we're having these large economic development discussions, is say, great, thank you for the jobs. Now help us solve these other challenges that will make you successful here.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the balance between housing and workforce development in the city.
Part of the issue here is that we're attracting low-income kind of jobs into town instead of high-income jobs. If you bring in more jobs of higher caliber, greater pay, then all of these housing issues and child care issues just don't matter as much, because the people coming into town have more money to pay for them. The plant at Amazon and the hog processing facility, that's not going to pay a whole lot of money, so it exacerbates the problem. And if we would shift the draw towards high-tech industries, we'd be better off.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on the balance between housing and workforce development.
Well, I'm happy to hear that the mayor would ask businesses to invest in infrastructure, because it hasn't been happening to this point. Affordable housing and childcare access are not new issues. They're age-old issues that need innovative solutions, and it's gotten significantly worse in the last 4 years. Again, investing in affordable housing by big businesses who are lucky to be building here is an obvious way to go. And to also understand that an Amazon worker is still going to be below poverty guidelines.
Ms. Islam, thank you.
Mr. Zakaitis, is Sioux Falls public transit system keeping up with our city's growth? And what, if any, would be actions your administration would take to improve it?
Public transit is a real problem. People don't think there's near enough of it, but yet it's a really expensive city service. The cost for one bus ticket is maybe $1, but for the city it's more like $13. And for paratransit, it's more like $65. So everybody wants more bus service, and it'd be really nice if you could double the number of buses and expand the routes out for the new areas. But the question is, where do you get the money to do that? Well, then if we could legalize recreational marijuana, the taxes on that we could probably use to further subsidize public transit, which is not keeping up with the city's needs. And if you talk to anybody who doesn't have a whole lot of money, who rides the bus regularly, they'll tell you that the bus service is just not good enough because it's too slow, it's not enough of it, and it doesn't go everywhere it needs to go. Well, if we have more money, we can sure fix that problem. But without a whole lot more money, it's going to be hard to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaitis. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on the city's transit system.
Well, what I would do is bring public-private partnerships around the table to figure out how to meet the demands of our employers. I'm learning that there are employers in town who have created their own public transportation system to get their employees to work. So if they can invest for their own employees, why can't we bring all of them together around the table to talk about how we're going to invest in an infrastructure that works for everyone? And it's critical to understand that there are long-term solutions and short-term solutions.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on the city's transit system.
Transit's a challenge. I won't argue with that. And our administration has been the first in the last 3 administrations that finally said, okay, we're going to at least tackle this. We're going to start innovating. We're going to do an on-demand transit pilot, which we've been running now for almost a year. I give it a C-. We're experimenting. We're learning what's working, what's not working. One of the detriments to that is people maybe don't feel as comfortable using the technology. We're also learning that there's certain areas of the city that a lot of on-demand rides are being requested to, so we've increased our fixed routes accordingly. So it's going to be a continued effort on our behalf.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Ms. Islam, expanding on an idea that was brought up just moments ago, Amazon has come to Sioux Falls and is on the verge of having a gigantic economic footprint here. The city has been welcoming of big businesses who show an interest in our area. What could or should the city be doing to make sure when these businesses come to town that they are good corporate citizens and make a true investment in the community?
To make the ask. Those asks are not being made. That's business as usual. We need to revamp how we are recruiting big businesses, because we need to grow, and we're going to continue to grow. Our trajectory of growth is upward, and if the pandemic didn't slow it down, nothing will. And so with that, we need to understand the essential infrastructural needs of the residents of Sioux Falls that they need to thrive and prosper. That's access to food and access to housing. And those would be my priorities when I become mayor. Because without access to those two things, we cannot have a thriving community. And the big businesses who are coming into our town and investing and bringing more jobs with them do have an obligation then to invest in that basic infrastructure that our community needs to grow. Because at the end of the day, we need more money to do all of these things. We cannot rely on federal funding, and so we need to rely on our business partners.
Ms. Islam, that's time. Thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, big business as good corporate citizens.
Yeah, I will say we just finished up about an $18 million raise for Forward Sioux Falls, a record-breaking campaign of which our business community contributes to, and those funds are used towards housing initiatives, workforce initiatives. They helped with the DSU Cybersecurity Park, which is going to bring 500 six-figure jobs to our community. So when we sit down with an Amazon, we can only ask what they'll give us. If we ask and they say, hey, we're not going to give you any incentives, there's not a lot we can do. They're going to come to our market, they're going to be a good player, and we're going to work with them.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the topic of big business as good corporate citizens.
By default, capitalism promotes greed. That's what it's all about. So when a company comes into town, their first reflex is to do whatever makes them the most money. I think the solution to this problem is to work with company management to let them understand the needs of their workforce, and that if the workforce doesn't get their basic needs met for, say, housing or childcare or a grocery store, then they're not going to be able to perform very well for that business.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you.
Mayor Tenhaken, Sioux Falls continues to experience record-breaking economic growth, but there are those who say you inherited a local economy that was on the upswing when you took office in your first term. To what extent have you been able to specifically affect the Sioux Falls economy?
Well, I think one of the biggest things we've done to affect the economy is make smart, pragmatic decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we allowed businesses to continue to operate, but do so in a way that they felt was best for the safety of their patrons and safety of their employees. You have seen other communities who swung that pendulum extremely far, one way or the other, and as a result, they're still dealing with the economic fallout from those decisions. So I'm proud of the way we got through the COVID-19 pandemic from an economic development standpoint. I will also say, and I just mentioned in the last question, a 500-job employer with $100,000 salaries, I don't think our city has ever seen that sort of project come to Sioux Falls before. And that took collaboration. That was working with the Board of Regents, the state, DSU, private philanthropy, Sanford Health. Those projects don't just happen without good leadership bringing the people together. And so I'm very proud of that project and what it's going to do for our community.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the city's economy.
Sometimes a mayoral candidate doesn't really have to go and rock the boat with every particular issue. If the economy is booming and we're bringing new businesses into town, you don't really have to change a whole lot. But if I do change anything, it would be to try to change the focus from low-income jobs more towards high-income jobs, because that's more profitable and it makes for a better city and it makes for a more progressive city. So we would support more initiatives like the cybersecurity department that's coming to town.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaitis. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on the city's economy.
You know, Sioux Falls is booming. It's a great place to be. And we owe gratitude to the business leaders and innovators from 30 years ago for the economic boom that we're seeing today. But with that excitement of growth, we have lost sight, the city has lost sight of the essential services that residents need to thrive and prosper. We're 4,500 units short of affordable housing, and we have 64,000 residents living in food deserts.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, residents on the south side of Sioux Falls say their quality of life is lacking to a certain degree because there's a lack of parks, swimming pools, and splash pads specifically for that area. would you commit to taking action to create more green space, specifically on the south side of Sioux Falls?
I love parks. I love nature. My city council PowerPoints always have a beautiful landscape on the end because I value nature and tranquility that much. Yes, the city needs to make sure that we have parks in the new areas, and if that's not being done, well, then there's something wrong with the Planning and Zoning Services Department because they should be putting parks everywhere the city is growing. I look at zoning changes at city council meetings, and I see a lot of agriculture to suburb or live work, but I don't see very much in the way of agriculture to park. So it looks like the city's zoning department is just not doing their job very well and not putting parks in newer parts of town. So yes, I would do that.
Mr. Sakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on the topic of more green space and parks on the south side of Sioux Falls.
I think this question is a clear indication of what Sioux Falls is lacking, which is a strategic citywide master plan. When we have a strategic citywide master plan, we are sure that all of the plans that city departments have are aligning together and that we're growing smart and we're growing in a way that meets the needs of the residents in the way that they deserve. Parks are absolutely necessary for each neighborhood to have. And when I met with the Parks Director, he explained what that process was going to be, but we need citywide.
Ms. Islam, I'm sorry, that's time. Thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on the topic of green space and parks, specifically for the south side of Sioux Falls.
Well, I would question the premise that that area is underserved because there are plenty of parks on that side of town. I will say that our Parks Master Plan, which we did do and is in the process of being reviewed, has aquatics as one of its top priorities. And so we're undergoing a process right now where we're going to determine where the next aquatics facilities have to be in our community. We made a small investment in Hayward Park with a splash pad in an area of town that very much needed aquatics. Could be the south side. It could be a revitalization of Frank Olson. We'll see what this next process of the aquatics bond review looks like.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you.
Ms. Islam, you've said as our city becomes increasingly diverse that it's important our leadership understands and can relate to our changing city. What makes you the candidate most able to do that?
I'm a first-generation American, born and raised in Michigan to hardworking immigrant parents who have truly achieved the American dream. Every day of my life has been an intercultural and interfaith experience, a lifelong skill set that cannot be mastered in a couple years. As we look at our school district population, we're getting more diverse as we're getting younger. When I've met with young people during this campaign trail, I've asked them what they need to stay in the city or return if they leave. And the resounding answer across race, gender, ethnicity has been we need more representative leadership. They need to see themselves as being leaders in our community, and I'm proud to be able to be that voice for that next generation and build the city that they deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhaken, what prepares you to lead an increasingly diverse city?
Well, when we talk about representative leadership, we have the most diverse city leadership team in the history of the city. We have 3 people of color serving on my 12-person leadership team. I have a female chief of staff serving in the city. But these things take time, just like a diverse police department takes time. We plant seeds now, and we're planting seeds in the kids and the youth now to say, we need you. We need you to stay here so you can be that leader, so you can step up and lead your community in the future. And I think we're doing that. And I think my role in the office has demonstrated that I'm open to that.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on why you're prepared to lead an increasingly diverse city.
I'm open and I care. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. You don't have to have a certain skin color or ethnic background. What you have to do is be open to suggestions, open to be able to talk to people, and to care what they have to say. Well, that's me. I look at problems and I find solutions. And one problem we have is racist marijuana enforcement in Minnehaha County. Well, I don't have to be black to figure that out. I can be white and figure that out. Well, we need to fix it.
Mr. Sakaitis, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, your administration capped the number of medical marijuana dispensaries in Sioux Falls at 5. Rapid City, a city half our size, is allowing 15 of these establishments. Why place limits on a growing industry that has business owners eager to set up shop in the Sioux Falls area?
Great question. North Dakota has 7 dispensaries. Iowa has 2 dispensaries for the entire state. We're going to have 5 in the city, Sioux Falls, just in the city. Brandon's got licenses their issue, Lincoln County, Minnehaha County. As a leader, you have to look at an issue and determine what should the market look like? What should video lottery look like? What should dispensaries look like? How many do we need? The population count that we've seen from the Department of Health estimates there's maybe 7,000 to 8,000 people in our state that would need a medicinal marijuana card. How many medicinal dispensaries do we need to meet that demand of 7,000 to 8,000 people? Make no mistake about it, and I voted for I Am 26. We'd be on the record. I voted for it because I know people that need cannabis for pain relief. But do we need medicinal cannabis facilities like convenience stores? Or do we need 5 opportunities within our city to get that service for people who need it from a medical standpoint?
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the topic of dispensaries in the Sioux Falls area.
The government of Sioux Falls is actively fighting the will of the people with regard to medical cannabis. South Dakota voters voted overwhelmingly in support of medical cannabis, but in Sioux Falls, your license costs you $50,000 a year, which is totally ridiculous. You are limited to being on the outskirts of town, which is completely unnecessary, and you have a great number of extreme regulations, all of which are completely unnecessary, and show that the government of Sioux Falls does not care what the people want.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on the topic of marijuana dispensaries in the Sioux Falls area.
The bedrock of democracy is respecting the will and the vote of the people. It's been clear what South Dakota residents voted for. And it's been clear that the process instituted by the city has been overly burdensome and inequitable in process. You have to have a lot of money to be able to invest in a license to open a dispensary. It becomes incumbent to understand statistically how many dispensaries are needed, and we have many examples of where it's working throughout the country.
Ms. Islam, thank you.
Mr. Zakaitis, you said local construction hasn't kept up with the growth of Sioux Falls. What specific steps would your administration take to incentivize the building of affordable housing in our city?
I talked about this a little bit before. Affordable housing is a great problem. There's not enough of it due to the economic incentives against affordable housing. We need to shift those incentives in favor of affordable housing. And that's really hard to do because it's kind of a low profit environment. I mean, who wants to make a little bit of money when they can make a lot of money? And I'm hoping that we can encourage developers to embrace the tiny housing movement and to maybe build some cheap mobile home parks. All of those things, you know, they're smaller, they're cheaper, and they can solve the lack of affordable housing and do so without economic subsidies. If you need subsidies, you're not going to be able to do it at scale. So the solutions I'm proposing can work at large volumes and high capacity and without subsidy, and maybe a quota system is necessary, but maybe not. We'll check.
Thank you, Mr. Skies. Ms. Islam, 30 seconds on how you would incentivize the building of affordable housing in Sioux Falls.
This current administration talks about workforce housing, and the question I've been asking people who know the answer is, who is that? Is that the 6-figure worker at DSU Cybersecurity? Or is that the MB childcare worker who makes $13 an hour? Without defining what affordable housing is, we're not meeting those needs. The current mayor was presented with a plan that the city needed to invest $70 million to come to equality for the $4,500 short.
Thank you, Ms. Islam. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on how your administration would incentivize affordable housing in Sioux Falls.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to the market, and the market is demanding higher housing right now. So what we have to do, and what we did do this last session, is lobbied legislators to pass $200 million in funding that will be matched by the city and by local developers for infrastructure, which will help to reduce costs and lower costs. But it's a tough issue. I met with the Home Builders Association and both the Realtors Association last week, both of whom have invested in my campaign and support me and have asked them to bring solutions to the table because they aren't necessarily city solutions as much as they are we solutions.
Thank you, Mayor Tenhaken.
Ms. Islam, current expansion plans for Falls Park include ideas for a disc golf course, a dog park, even a zip line. Some in the community feel these changes would make Falls Park into what feels like an amusement park. What are your thoughts on those ideas?
The natural beauty of Falls Park will be ruined by the current plan. And what I mean by that is parks are supposed to have green space where we can go as a community and enjoy it. It feels like the city is trying to make parts of downtown tourist attractions and not for the residents who are living here. To have a balance between both, we need to add more green space to the current plans so that families can come there and enjoy the natural beauty that Falls Park has to offer.
Ms. Islam, thank you. Mayor Tenhaken, 30 seconds on the Falls Park plan.
Well, the Falls Park plan is not as much a plan as it was ideas. We hired one of the best urban planners in the region called Confluence, and we said, throw out ideas. Dream big. Throw a lot of things against the wall. Nothing's been adopted. So they did. They dreamt big. They put a lot of ideas together. Do I feel we need a zip line at Falls Park? Gospel according to Paul? No. But that's what we're in the process of doing, is determining what the future of that park can look like with all these ideas we have in front of us.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you. Mr. Zakaitis, 30 seconds on the Falls Park plan.
There are some properties on the north end of Falls Park that don't look very good, and one of them is being removed, and maybe the others should go too. And if we yank out that kind of old, decrepit-looking stuff, well, then there's more space to grow Falls Park. For the most part, I think parks should be big, open, and green because, you know, you've got to get back to nature. No, don't need the amusement park quite so much. Disc golf is relatively, you know, peaceful and naturous, and so I'm happy with if somebody wants to put a disc golf thing in Falls Park.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the closing statements portion of this debate. Before the debate, we drew which candidate would go in what order, and our first closing statement will come from Mayor Paul Tenhaken, 60 seconds.
Well, thanks for hosting the format tonight. Thanks to those of you who turned out. The great thing about being an incumbent, blessing or curse, is you got 4 years of track record to run off. And the last 4 years of our city have been incredibly challenging. Social justice challenges, obviously a pandemic, tornadoes, flooding, and an increasingly wide dialogue chasm, as I mentioned earlier, that makes leading at a local level increasingly hard. But where we sit today is we sit in a city that has extreme optimism, that has strong economic growth, that has a lot of potential, that has crime that's flat or down year over year. We have record low unemployment. This community is a great, strong community. It's been an honor to lead through these last 4 years and through these challenging times. But you spend the first 4 years setting up the chessboard, building relationships, putting initiatives in play, and the next 4 years is really when you get to see the benefits of that. So if you'll vote for me on April 12th, I'd love to continue that work for the residents of our city.
Mayor Tenhaken, thank you for being with us here tonight. Mr. Zakaitis, 60 seconds for a closing statement.
I'm here because I want to make the world a better place. When I'm giving away my flyer, that's what I tell people. And really, that's my fundamental motivation. It's just to make the world a better place. I think we should try to develop honest, caring, practical government. And that's really the highest goal that I would have as a mayor, to be honest and open and caring and be good to as many people as I can. But I've looked at city government that we have now, and I'm kind of leery about some of the problems that I see. In particular, I see the mayor and the city council not investigating credible reports of bribery in their midst. And I find that lack of investigation really quite disturbing, because I would like to believe in the leaders that we have and the job that they're doing, but I really can't do that if they're not going to look at problems. But if we're honest and open and caring, we can solve all kinds of issues because the city has tremendous resources available.
Mr. Zakaitis, thank you for being with us tonight. Ms. Islam, 60 seconds for a closing statement.
Sioux Falls is booming, and we owe that credit to the visionaries of the last 30 years. But in the excitement of growth, the city has lost sight of the essential services that residents need to thrive and prosper. Today, we sit at 64,000 people who live in a food desert. We are 4,500 units short of affordable housing, and we have 4,000 school-age children at home unsupervised. We are on the cusp of building a city that is segregated, marginalized, and unsafe. But the exciting opportunity in this moment right now is to reprioritize and reinvest in essential services so that every single person in our community has an opportunity to thrive and prosper. With 20 years of community experience, I am the right person for the city right now. I would be honored for your vote. Thank you.
Ms. Islam, thank you for being with us tonight. And once again, we do say thank you to the candidates. We also say thank you to all of those in attendance here at the Washington Pavilion. They get our thanks as well for hosting this evening's debate.
I'd also like to thank the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce and AARP South Dakota. If you missed any of tonight's debate, you can find it on their Facebook pages, ArgusLeader.com or DakotaNewsNow.com.
And a reminder for you, the Sioux Falls City election comes up Tuesday, April 12th. For Trevor Mitchell, I'm Brian Allen, and good night from the Washington Pavilion.